Hi there. Welcome to Elevate Community Church, a church for every generation. And thank you so much for spending part of your weekend with us. My name is Lucy.
And my name is Lynn. If you're new with us today, we welcome you and are so glad to have you here. For us, church is so much more than just a Sunday service. And we want you to know that there is a perfect place for you at Elevate, where our mission is to love, lead, and lead like Jesus.
We're going to kick off with a few announcements and share a couple of things coming up for you and your family. So check this out.
One thing we truly value at Elevate is community. And whether today is your first time or Elevate has been your church for years, truly the best way to get connected with our family and start meeting others is through ministry groups.
These are so much more than a quick chat or handshakes at church. Small groups are where you can develop real and lasting friendships that go beyond just Sunday morning. To find the group perfect for you, simply contact the group leader who you see on here to get started. See you there.
Some of you have asked how you can continue to give during this time. Here are 2 ways you can do that. Give electronically through Zelle by sending to ecctreasury@gmail.com, or checks can be mailed to 1400 College Avenue, Fort Worth, Texas 76104. If you are new with us, don't feel any obligation to give whatsoever. We're just glad you're here.
Please make sure to stay connected with us throughout the week on Facebook. Messages in English will be on Facebook Live every Saturday evening at 7:30 p.m. And messages in Vietnamese will be on Facebook Live every Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. Last but not least, ever since the COVID-19 outbreak, we are seeing more and more people in need of help. Some of us want to help but don't know how. Well, here's how. Our church is partnering up with Philip's Wish, a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded by a little boy who saw a need in the world and decided to do something about it. His concern for the homeless was the catalyst to help thousands by gifting them with blankets, coats, sleeping bags, toys, toiletries, and non-perishable food. If you would like to be a part of this priceless movement, what better time than now? ECC Council members will be gathering and collecting these items at your door. Simply let us know when and we will come pick up your donations and take it to the food bank pantry drop-off location. If you have questions, please contact Ethan Ho at 214-597-0037, ECC at 817-770-7879. Or to learn more about Philip's Wish, please check out www.philipswish.com. With all that said, enjoy the rest of your worship with us. Thanks again for being with us. Be safe and God bless.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. When I was your fault, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it. Still, you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Greetings, Elevate Community Church. Thank you for joining with us today, and really glad that you're here. And for everyone else who's joining us online, thank you for being with us and joining with us today. And I do have one announcement, and it's a good announcement, and that is starting next weekend, Sunday, June 14th, we will be meeting to worship again in a physical location, so at the church building, starting next week. And we will have some changes with that. Of course, we'll be practicing some social distancing, along with doing some things that are exercising some precaution to make sure that we're keeping everyone safe and healthy. And for anyone else, for those of you who would prefer to stay at home and continue to worship with us online, we appreciate you and hope that you will continue to do that. So we also have some information that you'll be able to see online on our Facebook page, or possibly on our website, and so you can be out on a lookout for that to see some of the changes and what we're doing in order to come back together to meet together as a community in a physical location. So again, excited and can't wait to see you next week in person. All right, so today, well, let's talk a little bit. It's been quite a week. There's been a lot that's gone on this week. And if we look around, we would probably say that something is very wrong right now, not only in our local communities, but in our national community. That things aren't the way that it should be. And so we've heard about or maybe seen videos, read about these different protests, riots. There's a lot going on. And it's probably caused many of us to feel a range of emotions. That for some of us, we might feel worried, anxious about what we're seeing, about what we're hearing about. For some of us, we might be feeling anger, that we are seeing injustice, and it stirs up this anger within us. That's something that we're looking at, something that we're seeing, that we're witnessing as we're watching these videos, as we're reading these stories, hearing these stories shared, that it's stirring up, that we're saying there's some injustice that's happening. And it's making us feel very angry. For some of us, we are confused. Others of us, we might just feel discouraged. We look around, we say, we're going through this pandemic and still suffering from all these things as a community, as a country, and now we've got this, and we may feel very disheartened. Some of us might feel helpless. Others of us might feel that we've lost hope in all this. And no matter where we're at or how we perceive the things that have happened, I can almost guarantee that these events that have happened this past week have been traumatic to us. They've been traumatic to us individually, but also as a community, as a nation. So I do have concern for you, and I hope that what we talk about today is able to offer you some peace and some comfort. But as we've, probably as we've gone through all these range of emotions this past week, we've said to ourselves, we thought, this isn't right. Like, this is not the way things should be. Like, all these things that are happening, something needs to change. Something needs to be different. Like, this should not be happening. And this is how we felt. This is the things that we've been thinking. And so first, I would like to take this time to, first of all, acknowledge the pain and the grief of the Black community. That pain and grief is very real. And I would like to take this time to acknowledge that. Secondly, I want to take this time to acknowledge the pain and grief of the broader community in our nation. That many of us are going through so many things right now, and we're hurting. And I want to acknowledge your pain and grief as you watch right now, as you're joining right now and you're listening to this message, that your pain and grief is very real. And many of us are hurting in different ways because of all these events that are going on. And this past week, I've asked myself a few questions. Before drawing opinions, before making judgments, I've asked myself these questions. I've asked myself, if I were George Floyd, how would I feel? And I've asked myself, if I were George Floyd's family, how would I feel? Or if I were a Black man, how would I feel? Or if I were a business owner whose business suffered damage at the hands of looters or rioters, how would I feel? And I've asked myself, if I were a police officer during this time, how would I feel? And so, instead of trying to jump to all these different judgments or try to figure out what my opinions are on all these things, instead I've tried to take the time this past week and consider, really think, and really dwell in not only thought, but really dwell in feeling, in emotion, and just trying to ask myself, how does any of this make me feel if I'm in this person's shoes, if I'm in this person's shoes? And And what I think is good for all of us, not only for myself, but for all of us, is if we're able to respond as followers of Christ, is if instead of responding according to my personal opinions or according to my own flesh, that I would respond, and each of us as followers of Christ would respond according to the Spirit of Christ as He leads us. So, in order to respond by God's Spirit, we've got to seek God's heart and His will in all this. So let's press into the heart and the mind of God. And we'll do that by going first to Matthew chapter 18, verse 12 through 14. And this is Jesus. He's telling a story. He's telling a parable. And this is what He says. He says, "What do you think? If someone had 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, won't he leave the 99 on the hillside and go and search for the stray? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he rejoices over that sheep more than over the 99 that did not go astray. In the same way, it is not the will of your Father in heaven that one of these little ones perish." So the first thing that we can see about the heart of God is that Jesus cares about the one. Meaning, when Jesus tells this story, He tells a story about the shepherd. The shepherd has 100 sheep. And of course, the shepherd cares about his flock. But the shepherd, if just one of those sheep goes and gets lost, that shepherd is willing to leave the 99 sheep that are still remaining just to go find that one. And it talks about the heart of the shepherd, which reflects the heart of God, in that God doesn't just care about all, but He cares about each. So in the same way that this shepherd didn't just care about his whole flock and all 100 of his sheep, but he showed that he cared about each and every single one of his sheep, so that when one sheep went astray and got lost, that shepherd went to look for that one sheep. And what was the shepherd's response in that? That when that shepherd found that one sheep, he rejoiced even more over that one sheep that he found than over the 99 that were still there. And that shows us the heart of God. That shows us that if God's heart is caring, is so concerning for just that one sheep, just that one person, then of course God cares about each and every one of us. Of course God cares about us collectively, as a whole, all of us. Because He shows that He's willing, in the same way that the shepherd is willing to go search for just one, God is willing and has a heart in the same way for each of us for just one, when we are just one. So when we know the heart of God, when we understand His care and His concern and what He's willing to do and how He feels about just one, about each of us, about each person, we can see that when one person is suffering or has been wrong, God's heart breaks each and every time. We can see that God's heart doesn't ever harden. He doesn't ever become desensitized to the evil and the wicked that goes on. He never grows to the point that He just becomes used to seeing this suffering and that He no longer cares. Because He's not like us. We're human. We're flesh and bone. And we respond many times in that flesh, but God is different. God is spirit, and His care, His concern, His love is unlike anyone's. Like, no one can compare with Him. Nothing can compare to God's love. So when any one person is hurting, is suffering, God feels that person's pain. He grieves every single time something wrong happens. So for every single act of injustice and for every person that it happens to, God feels that. He experiences that with them. So knowing God's heart, seeing how he feels, seeing what his heart is, how it is, we could say, I would say, that God hates what happened recently. That a man lost his life at another person's hands. So God hurts for the black person who suffers injustice. God hurts for the protester who was harmed by police. God hurts for the business owner whose business was damaged or destroyed by other people. He hurts for you as you witness and as you experience these negative events. But his care and concern doesn't end there. It goes far beyond that. It extends even further because God also hurts for the crooked cop. He also hurts for the racist person filled with hatred. He also hurts for the looter, and he hurts for the rioter. And where you and I would draw lines for how much care and concern and who we would care and show concern for, God doesn't draw that line. That his care and his concern and his love is unlike anyone's. That he extends it and he cares and he hurts because there is none like him. His care and his concern, it's radical, it's incomprehensible. We cannot understand it. So the question would be, if God's care and his concern is that great, and if it's that real, why doesn't he do something about it? And that brings us to our second point, which is to know God's heart, we only need to take a look at his hands. As in, we take a look at the actions that he takes, at what he's done and what he continues to do. Does God sympathize with those who are hurting, with those who are suffering from injustice? And the answer is yes. But his sympathy isn't just a sympathy that looks at a distance and says, I feel sorry for you. But he also empathizes. He also feels what that person is going through. But again, it's not just an empathy that looks from a distance and says, wow, I really feel what you're going through. But rather, if we take a look at God's hands, if we take a look at his actions, what we'll see is that God entered into our mess, that he stepped foot right into it, that he was willing to get his hands dirty as well. God's name, Jesus' name, when he was born, when he came on the earth, God said, this is what you're going to name him. You're going to name him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Because God doesn't just look down from heaven and see our hurt and see the injustice that we go through and say, wow, I'm sorry that you have to go through that. But instead, through Jesus Christ, God entered into our mess. That through Jesus, the Son of God, Jesus, who was infinite, became finite. He came into the world, and he was all-powerful, yet became weak for our sake. He was immortal and chose to become mortal. He was a king who chose to become a servant. He was deity who chose to become human. He didn't just keep a distance and look at the human situation and feel sorry and feel sympathy, but rather he entered into it, that he himself was willing to take that action. But not only that, to see the heart of God, we can look at the hands of Jesus, as in the literal hands of Jesus. And what do we see if we were to look at the hands of Jesus? We would see nails pierced into his hands and the scars that it left there. And that helps us to understand what he was willing to do, that he entered into our situation. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was willing to suffer injustice. He knows injustice, not simply because he empathizes with us, not simply because he sees and understands it, but he knows injustice because he was willing to go through it. He was willing to experience it himself. And he suffered not just injustice, but greater injustice than anyone has ever seen. He suffered the greatest injustice in all of human history, then and now, because there was none more innocent than him. That of all people who didn't deserve to happen what happened to him, he was the least deserving, that he was innocent in every aspect, in every way, that he was perfect, that he was pure in heart, and yet he was willing to allow evil man to kill him, to take his life, to beat him, to oppress him. He was willing to walk through that, to take that injustice upon himself. So he knows injustice. That's the action that he took. And so if we were to look at his hands, we would see the scars that prove that he took action because he cares, and that's his heart. And not only has he done something by dying on the cross, by being crucified, but he continues to do something, and he will do something. And this brings us to our third point, which is that Jesus is going to reconcile all things. And we can read in Colossians chapter 1, verse 20, which tells us, "For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him," as in Jesus, "and through him to reconcile everything to himself, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross." Jesus is going to reconcile everything. In other words, he's going to renew all things. He's going to restore everything. And that also means he's going to bring about justice in the end. Ultimately, he will bring justice to all of creation. He will bring peace because he's going to return as king. And when we look at this, it's important and it's essential for us to keep a perspective that one day Jesus will bring about justice. Because right now, we all desire justice. We all desire what's good and what's right to happen. We all desire for what's the things that are being committed right now that are wrong, for it to stop, and for those wrongs to be made right. And we all desire that. And so many of us are working towards that in different ways, through expression of our voices, through protests, peaceful protests, through all kinds of different ways. And the truth is that we can make a difference on this earth in this life, and we should. We are called to do that, especially as followers of Christ. We are called to make a difference. We are called to bring about justice on earth, the justice of God where we can, to demonstrate God's kingdom, that there is justice. But the justice that we bring on earth, it's going to be limited. That it only goes to a certain extent. That there is a point where it's not enough. There is a point where it will fall short. We can bring about a change in this world, a good change, and we should. we should work towards that. We should make efforts to do everything that we can to make these changes, to do that, to bring about good change in the world that we live in. But we also have to remember that the change that we bring, it's limited in its range and in its depth. There's only so much that we can do. And the justice that we bring about here on this earth, it's actually a shadow of something greater to come. The justice that we see and that we're able to bring about on earth is really, it's a glimpse. It's a vague and unclear picture of an even greater and truer and better justice, and everlasting justice that is coming. That's what we're aiming for. That's the justice that we desire, is this justice that Jesus is going to bring. Because on this earth and on this life, we can correct some injustices. We can make changes that are good. But we can't fix every injustice. We won't be able to correct everything that's wrong. We won't be able to right every wrong. That in this life, many of us, the injustices that we will endure and have endured, it will remain there. That many things, that there will be many injustices that we experience, that others experience, that will remain, that they will not be made right. But one day, Jesus is going to reconcile all things to himself, meaning he will make every wrong right. He will bring justice to every injustice that has happened. In Revelation chapter 21, verse 4, it says, "He," as in Jesus, "will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Grief, crying, and pain will be no more, because the previous things have passed away." So should we make every effort to do what we can? Yes, we should. But all that we do, in the end, it still won't be enough. But thankfully, Jesus is enough, because he will bring justice when he returns. He will bring peace when he returns. His care and concern, his heart for us, for each and every one of us, breaks right now. But he's going to wipe away every tear. He's going to comfort every grief. He's going to restore all things and make all things right. And that's our hope. That's our peace for today. So while we work for justice and a better world, we also hope and wait for what is coming, because that is what's truer and everlasting. So I hope that through all this, that we're able to see the heart of God. We're able to see his care and his concern, and what he's done through his Son, Jesus Christ, and what he's going to do. Jesus Christ is going to return as King. As a king who's bringing a reign of peace, of love, of goodness, of hope to each of us who puts our faith in him, to those of us who trust him. That's what he has in store. And that is our hope. That is what we can look towards. Will you pray with me? Father God, we thank you for your heart. We thank you for how you've demonstrated your heart through what you've done. That you allowed your hands to be nailed upon the cross through your Son, Jesus Christ. And today we have hope, because now your Son has risen from the dead and is in heaven with you and will return one day to reign as King. And that is our hope, God. You are our peace. You are our hope that we trust and believe and know that that's going to happen, God. And we know that right now you're hurting alongside so many people, those who are hurting and suffering right now, the grief that many of us feel in all of our local communities, in our nation, God, that you are just as grieved, God. And that's why you desire for us to know your Son Jesus and the hope that he brings and the comfort that he brings for every grief, every pain, every tear that we will experience in this life, Father. Thank you for your Son, Jesus. We thank you and pray in his name. Amen. Once again, thank you for joining, and look forward to seeing you in person next week. Thank you.